Welcome once again, my friends, and thank you for stopping by to listen to an old storyteller. Today we have a story from Scotland, and the title of this story is Whippety Stourie. Long, long ago, in the days when women spun their own thread, and sometimes even wove it into stuff on the loom, there lived a man who was very rich and prosperous. But he had had to work hard when he was young and poor, and he had the idea that everybody ought to be able to do useful work. One day this fine gentleman, whose name was Sir Richard, the king having knighted him on account of his many valorous doings at home and abroad, was out riding on his horse when he saw over the top of a yew hedge 3 pretty ladies, all playing on a green lawn with a golden ball. And by what he considered a piece of great good luck for him, one of the 3 threw the ball so high and so far that it flew right over the yew hedge into the lane in which he was riding. So he quickly dismounted from his horse and began searching for the ball. And just as he had found it, the gate in the yew hedge opened up, and out came the prettiest and youngest of the 3 maidens, and looked about to see if she might see their lovely plaything. Sir Richard, with great presence of mind, immediately dropped the ball into the ditch and went on searching, because he had hoped that in that way he might see more of the pretty maiden. She came a few steps down the lane. "Good day, fair maid," said Richard. "I saw a golden ball fly over the hedge. Maybe it belongs to you. I am looking for it here in the ditch." "That is very kind," said the maiden. "It certainly belongs to me and my sisters, but we would not have you put yourself out for such a trifle." Sir Richard made a deep bow. "I could not easily think of a happier task in the whole world," he said, "than to be of any help to such a lovely lady. But I have no doubt your eyes are quicker than mine. It would be very kind if you would help me in my search." So the maiden and the knight both searched in the ditch, and presently, for very shame, for he knew where he had dropped it, the knight picked up the ball, wiped it carefully on his silk sleeve, and gave it to the maiden. And as he looked at her again, he thought she was the most beautiful lady he had ever seen, and that he would never be satisfied until he had her for his wife. Sir Richard did not even know the name of the lovely maiden whom fate had thrown so fortunately across his path, but he was a determined man and an eager wooer, and when you get those 2 things together, it is not a difficult matter to guess what the end of it will be, for the old proverb is right enough when it says that where there's a will, there's a way. The Lady Barbara found it easy enough to love him, for he was a gallant lover, and at the end of 3 months the wedding took place. And a fine and handsome wedding it was, as you may guess, and all the gentry for many miles were bidden to the festivities. But there was not one among all the lovely ladies there to compare with the beautiful bride. Her eyes were as blue as the flower of the flax, and her hair was like a field of buttercups with the sun on them. But loveliest of all was her rosy red mouth, than which, so it was said, there was none more beautiful in the whole country. She brought with her a fine dowry, for her father was a rich man, and wished his daughter to be short of nothing that a fair and high-born lady should have. But one thing that the bridegroom insisted upon was that there should be no linen among her dowry. The father of Lady Barbara, imagining that Sir Richard's fine castle was already well stocked with beautiful linen of every sort, made no serious objection to this, though if her mother had been alive, but she, alas, had been dead for many a long year, I think she might not have fallen in with this plan quite so readily. But she took with her many great chests full of beautiful gowns of silk and satin, bonnets and hats with gay feathers on them, laces almost as fine as the web of a spider, bright shawls and lovely jewelry, and many other things befitting a high-born lady. But although she found the castle full of fine mirrors and chairs and tables and handsome hangings, there was but little store of sheets and napkins and linen covers and such things. And when at the end of a month the Lady Barbara mentioned the matter, her husband, whom she had already discovered to be a determined person, though he was always most loving and affectionate to his beautiful wife, turned and looked at her with a serious gaze. "There is no linen," said he, "because I have had no wife to spin it as every good wife should, whatever her station in life. Till now you have had nothing to do except enjoy yourself. glad I have been that it was so, but henceforth I shall expect you to spin 12 hanks of thread a day, my dear, and I know you will do this gladly to please me." Lady Barbara was aghast. She had never been taught to spin, and she had very little idea as to how to do it. "I will do my best," she said, for she was of a gentle and amiable disposition, and those were days when wives were supposed to obey their husbands. But she did not get on very well, for spinning is not an easy thing to learn, as anyone who has ever tried to do it knows well. Her husband was vexed about this. He had set his heart on her spinning the house linen, and when he found she was getting on so slowly, he showed his displeasure, and she was quite unhappy. Then one day he had to go away on a journey which would keep him away for a week. Before he started, he said he would expect her to have work to spin while he was away, and he had hoped to see a large pile of hanks of spun thread on his return home. Then he kissed her on her lovely red mouth and rode off sadly, for he did not know how he would get through a whole week without sight of her. But when he was gone she wept, for she feared she would never learn to spin, and she went for a walk along the hillside and sat down on a big flat stone and again wept bitterly. And presently, through her weeping, she heard sounds of a lovely soft music which seemed to come from beneath the stone on which she was sitting. She rose up from her seat and found it was quite easy to lift the stone. And what do you think she found beneath it? A cave in which sat 6 wee ladies, so the tale goes, in green dresses, and every one of them spinning away at a tiny spinning wheel, and each singing this queer little rhyme. "Little knows my dame at hand, that Whippety Stourie is my name." Lady Barbara walked into a cave, and the 6 little ladies very kindly asked her to take a seat while they kept on spinning. She noticed that every one of them had her mouth all drawn on one side, but of course she said nothing about it, as she felt that it would not be polite. They asked her how it came that such a grand and beautiful lady should look so unhappy, for they could see that she had been crying. So then she told them that her husband, although he was such a rich man, thought she should be able to spin, but that she had never been brought up to spin, and much feared she would never learn. And she also told them about the pile of hanks of spun thread which he expected to see on his return, and that she knew she would never, never get this done. "And that is all?" said the green ladies, speaking as it were out of their cheeks. "And don't you think that it's a very big all?" said the Lady Barbara, her heart ready to break with grief. "We can easily get rid of that trouble for you," said the little green ladies. "All you need to do is ask us to dinner on the day your husband is to come home. You'll see then how we shall manage him." So the Lady Barbara gladly invited them all 6 to dine at the castle the day on which her husband was to arrive home. On the day of his return, he found the whole house so busy with preparations for dinner, for Lady Barbara was a good housekeeper, even though she was not able to spin very well, that he never had a moment to ask her about the thread she was supposed to have spun in his absence. And when the hour for dinner drew near, she came in wearing her gown of silk and fur, with her golden hair gleaming, and her blue eyes shining, and her red mouth smiling, for she had the greatest confidence in the powers of the little green ladies. And so the thought of the spun thread went right out of her husband's head, and he could think once more of nothing but her graciousness and her beauty. And in a few minutes the 6 little ladies arrived in a wonderful little coach with 6 tiny cream horses. The harness glittered with precious stones, and there was a frog for the coachman, and a nimble lizard for footman. They themselves were as grand as 6 princesses, though they were still dressed in green from head to foot. Sir Richard was very polite indeed to them, helping them out of the carriage while the lizard held the door open, and showed them up the stairs himself with a lighted silver candle in each of his hands. And at the top stood his lovely wife waiting to receive them. And in the fine banqueting chamber a splendid dinner was laid out, with silver dishes piled up with all the good things you can imagine. So they all sat down to dinner, and the 6 little ladies were very bright and talkative, and everything went on swimmingly. But towards the end of the meal, when the host was getting rather lively, and beginning to feel really at home with his guests, he said, "Ladies, I hope you will not think it an uncivil question, but I should so much like to know how it has come about that all your mouths are twisted to one side." "Oh," they all said together, "that comes from our constant spinning." "Is that so?" cried Sir Richard. "Then John, Tom, and Dick, you go off with all haste you can and burn up every reel and spinning wheel in the whole of this place, for I will not have my wife spoil her bonny face with spinning." And so ends the tale. The lady lived happily with her goodman all the rest of her days. Thank you once again for listening to this story. If you enjoyed this story, please press that like button. Also, please help an old storyteller out by subscribing to my channel. The next story will be posted in a few days, so until then, may your story continue to be a good one.